Hey guys, Ronan here. Just a real quick update. I've been noticing that a lot of my patrons have been climbing in the amount that they've been donating. So I just want to take the time to start thanking them individually. So from this point forward, in each video, I'm going to shout out one patron that's in my Shogun or higher tier. So with all that being said, today's special shout out is going to go to Dylan Nicholson. Thank you very much for the extra support. Now, let's get into the video. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today is a much anticipated part, but before we get into that, I'm going to need you to take a look at this analytical stat bar right here. If you notice, 62.6% of you that watch my content are not subscribed. So, if you could do me a favor and just hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you'll never miss a video, then that'll be greatly appreciated. But, with all of that being said, let's get into part 12 of What If Ash Won the Sinnoh League? The Tobias versus Ash battle. I hope you enjoy. It's the night of Ash's top 8 battle, and he is preparing for the top 4 that he has ahead of him. Dawn and Brock have left him alone at his request, so he can be 100% ready. His battle is in the morning, and he wants to make sure nothing is left unturned. But there is one thing he cannot shake. Barry and Conway. They won't stop pestering him. Barry goes on and on about how scary this guy is, but providing nothing of real use. However, Conway does have some information for Ash. You know, I've been tracking Tobias for a while, he says, catching the attention of Ash. Conway, obsession isn't really that healthy. Well, my obsession is what's going to help you, Ash. But if you don't want my help, then I will just leave. Then Barry screams, "Stop!" This catches both of their attention. I know I'm not making any sense, he says, but listen, I watched him battle my dad, and he steamrolled him with just his Darkrai. Really, Ash says? That's not all, Conway interjects. He did the same with all of the gym leaders as well. He even beat Wagner just after you battled him, Ash. Oh, well, I see what you mean. This guy really is on another level. It's at this point, Paul walks by with his Electivire. Paul, are you going for some last-minute training, Ash asks. Yeah, my top 4 battle is after yours, Ash. I won't lose, and you better not either. Our match is only worthy of the finals. That is, if you can make it there. Paul then walks off. Barry is angered by Paul, but Ash just laughs, thinking to himself, Paul will be there. It's at this point the computer in front of Ash pings. Then Professor Oak appears on the screen. Ash, all of your Pokemon you have requested are ready. All of them, he questions? Yes, they are all ready to be transported. Ash then puts all 6 balls one by one, changing out his Sinnoh team for his reserves, the ones he will need for the task ahead. Professor Oak tells Ash not to worry about Pikachu's ball. Even though he didn't send it, Oak disabled the ball so the PC thinks that Pikachu is with Oak, so it can stay there to cheer Ash and his other Pokemon on. Thanks, Professor, Ash says, as the screen goes dark. Looking at Pikachu, well buddy, this is it. Let's leave it all out on the field. Pikachu sparks in confidence, as Conway and Barry pester Ash about the Pokemon that he has chosen, while the night fades away. The next morning, to a packed stadium, Ash and Pikachu walk out to the battlefield. The crowd is cheering, while in the stands, Dawn, Brock, Conway, and Barry all watch on, cheering for Ash. Opposite of Ash, Tobias enters the field. He smiles but says nothing, seemingly focused on the task ahead. The two take their positions on the battlefield as the ref lays out the rules. Nothing special, but the presence of Tobias is something Ash is now feeling for the first time. He knows that he can't lose here, or the rematch his Pokemon want with Paul won't happen. It's at this point the announcer declares the start of the top 4. Letting the festivities begin, Tobias wastes no time, sending out the Pokemon Ash knew was coming, Darkrai. Knowing he has his work cut out for him, Ash sends out his best chance against this master of darkness. Heracross, I choose you! The beetle hits the field, looking around for Bulbasaur as it's a little hungry. Ash tells it to focus. This is a battle. All the while, Barry is complaining because Ash is starting the battle the same way he did. Man, he must really like my style. Dawn tells Barry to be quiet. They are here to watch, not commentate. Remembering his past experiences with Darkrai, Ash knows this won't be easy. So, he keeps his distance by ordering a Hyper Beam. To counter, Tobias orders an Ice Beam. The moves collide, canceling each other out. It's at this point, Heracross can't move, giving Tobias the opening needed to call for a Dark Void, putting Heracross right to sleep. But Ash was ready for this. Heracross may be asleep, but it begins to swell with power. Ash smiles, as Barry asks what's happening. Brock says that's Heracross's ability, Guts. It happens when a status condition affects it. Well, that's done, Barry says. Heracross is asleep, so it won't be able to use that power. Brock tells him yes, normally that's the case, but this is Ash's Heracross. Then, they hear the command, Heracross, use Sleep Talk. The group looks on as Heracross, who is still very much asleep, flies limply toward Darkrai with the glowing horn to land its Mega Horn, drive it into the wall of the stadium, as Heracross has no control over itself. Ash celebrates, knowing that was a major hit, but it's short-lived, as Heracross is hit with a Dream Eater that one-shots it in the process, giving Ash his first loss. Though that may have been sudden, Ash isn't shaken. He now knows the moveset of this Pokemon for the most part. There is also the fact that even though Darkrai gained back some health, it's still feeling that Mega Horn. Ash can tell where it took the attack. It is a spot Darkrai looks to be guarding. With all of this on his mind, he chooses to lead with his Hoenn Ace, the Master to Infernape. Sceptile, I choose you! The Grass Gecko hits the field, ready for its chance to topple a Legendary. The start of the battle is called, with Tobias ordering an Ice Beam, but Ash has a counter for this. Detect! Sceptile eyes down the attack, sidestepping it. Then, Ash counters with the Leaf Blade, hoping his Pokemon's speed can outpace Darkrai. Unfortunately, things end the same way, with it falling victim to a Dark Void. Tobias smiles, saying nothing once more. Ash then begins calling to Sceptile, hoping it will wake up. But nothing, only silence. Darkrai responds with a Dark Pulse at the command of its trainer. It connects, cracking Sceptile with an explosion on contact. Still, Sceptile does not wake. Then, the end. Darkrai, Ice Beam, Ash hears. The Shadow Spectre begins to charge the battle-ending attack. With nothing else to do, Ash calls to Sceptile. Inside Sceptile's dreams, an echo can be heard. Something familiar to it. A voice. It knows this voice. Then a bright light pierces through the darkness. Back in the battle, Tobias tells Darkrai to fire the attack. The Ice Beam comes crashing in. With one last scream at the top of his lungs, Ash calls, Sceptile! As the attack connects. Smoke envelops the air from the explosion that ensues. The ref prepares to call this match, only for Ash to give a command. Sceptile, use Leaf Blade! Tobias, now giving attention to the battle, looks around, but it's too late. Sceptile appears, glowing in a green aura behind Darkrai, as it drops the Phantom from an overgrown, powered Leaf Blade. Tobias and the rest of the stadium look on in shock. This boy's the first one to ever knock out his Darkrai. The ref calls the battle in favor of Sceptile, as it looks on, spitting out its twig, almost saying, you'll have to do better than that. The ref then calls for Tobias to recall his Pokemon, which finally snaps him out of his obvious confusion. Recalling his Mon, Tobias looks on as Ash and Pikachu check up on Sceptile. Though its Overgrow has been activated, Ash determines it should rest, so he recalls it for later. This is where Tobias breaks his silence for the first time. I heard there was another strong trainer here. Ash, would you happen to be the trainer that won the Kanto Battle Frontier? Surprised, Ash responds, yes. I also took on the Sinnoh Battle Frontier as well, but the best I could do was tie with Brandon. Well, this explains a lot, Tobias says. I took on the Sinnoh Battle Frontier as well, in preparation for this competition. But I did not battle Brandon, though I was still declared a champion of that festivity. I must say, I haven't been taking this battle seriously, but that's about to change, as Tobias readies a Pokeball. Ash notices the change in his demeanor here, hoping he didn't just poke a sleeping Ursaring. Back in the stands, the group are talking about what just happened, when a familiar voice is heard from behind them. Turning, they all recognize Scott, the president of the Battle Frontier. Don asks what he's doing here. Scott says he wouldn't miss watching out two Frontier champions battling it out. Wow, so Tobias really did take on the Sinnoh Battle Frontier? Did he beat Brandon, Brock asks? No, Scott replies. That's the one advantage Ash has on Tobias. Brandon wasn't officially part of the Sinnoh Battle Frontier when Tobias came through, but Ash has done something that none of my brains were able to do. What's that? Don asks. He took out Darkrai. Now, we are in uncharted waters, and Ash is in the eye of the storm. Hopefully his skills can help him weather it, as they look on, watching the match play out. Back on the field, the ref calls for the next choice of the combatants. Tobias is the first to choose, as he calls Shaymin! The grass hedgehog takes to the field, capturing the crowd with its cuteness. Ash, looking on, was not expecting something this pretty, but he knows he's got the perfect Pokemon to battle this thing. A sure win. Swallow, I choose you! Ash's Hoenn Flyer takes to the air, eyeing its prey from afar. The match is then called for the start, and Ash wastes no time, calling for an aerial ace. Tobias tells Shaymin to wait. Hold strong. It stands, taking a battle-ready stance, as Swallow holds nothing back, driving its beak into its prey with all of the force it can muster. Unfortunately, this is what Tobias wanted, calling for a sweet kiss that connects, confusing Swallow in the process. Suddenly, it starts flying erratically, not really making any sense in its movements, dropping Shaymin in the process. As it lands back on the battlefield, Shaymin looks around, trying to get a sense for its location. Then, it sees something. Glancing back at its trainer, Tobias nods. Do it. Suddenly, Shaymin bolts across the field, as Ash calls for Swallow to attack, but to no avail. Shaymin finally reaches its destination, a small patch of flowers that grow in the far corner of the field. Shaymin submerges itself into the bed. It's at this point, Ash gets through to Swallow, calling for an air slash. It fires into the flower bed, tearing it into pieces. But the target escapes, taken to the air. Great, Ash thinks. Shaymin's taking a sky form. Well, things just got a little bit harder. Tobias then calls for a Zen headbutt, which connects, as Swellow isn't fully over its confusion as of yet. This sends it spiraling to the ground, where it strikes with a blood-curdling thud. Swellow isn't out, as it's still flailing around, but it won't come back to its senses. To this, Ash decides to recall it so he can break the confusion. But we don't have to wait long, as Ash chooses to send back in Swellow, surprising everyone, including Paul in the stands. Ash calls Swellow, making sure it's alright. Tobias won't let this continue, as he calls for another sweet kiss. But this is where Ash pulls out an old combo attack, calling for a quick attack into an aerial ace. This allows it to outpace the sweet kiss and connect, leaving Shaymin with a nasty headache. But Tobias won't let this go unpunished, as he calls for an air slash. Swellow counters with one of its own, but Swellow's misses, allowing Shaymin to land the hit. This stuns the flyer, giving Shaymin the opening needed to land a second headbutt, sending Swellow into the ground for a final time. Ash recalls Swellow, thanking it for the battle it fought. Tobias chooses to do the same, wanting to save Shaymin for later. Since Ash lost this battle, it's up to him to make the next choice. Wanting a heavy hitter, Ash chooses to go with Sir Thickness himself. Snorlax! I choose you! Snorlax hits the ground with a quake, fully awake compared to its normally usual sleepy demeanor. Tobias can see that this is something of a girthy variety, so he chooses to send in the spirit of the volcano himself, Entei, as the beast of Johto takes to the field. A mighty roar can be felt, while in the distance a rumbling can be heard. The tension is thick as the crowd watches on. Another legendary from Tobias, they all murmur. But Ash isn't worried. Snorlax is the perfect powerhouse he needs to counter this. The match starts at the command of the ref, with Tobias calling for a fire blast. Ash wastes no time. Snorlax, Ice Punch! This has enough power to hold back the mighty attack, barely singeing the hair on its knuckles. Unsurprised, Tobias orders an extreme speed, knowing he will take the lead here. But Snorlax just takes the onslaught, retaliating with the body slam. The weight behind the attack is enough to push back the legendary, but neither it nor Tobias are concerned. Power will be the way to win here, so he orders an Iron Head. The speed of Entei plays a big part here, allowing it to connect, causing a flinch. This allows Entei a free fire blast that unfortunately does more than damage, leaving behind a burn when the flames subside. Snorlax felt that one, and Tobias knows it. Ash isn't worried, telling Snorlax to retaliate with another body slam. Entei tries to counter with another Iron Head, but Ash tells Snorlax to use its hand to push Entei's head into the ground. This puts Snorlax full weight above the Volcano Lion, as it caught some air with the movement involved. This allows Snorlax to crash down on Entei with a half a ton of mass that causes the legendary to yelp in pain. Once Snorlax moves off of Entei, it's clear that the back of it took most of the force. This results in a paralysis that took away the only real advantage that Entei had, its speed. But this came at a cost. Snorlax is starting to tire, and Ash can see it. Tobias can too. Not wanting to put in another mon that could end up getting hurt, Tobias chooses to keep an Entei, calling for another Fire Blast. Ash chooses to put off the damage, calling for a Protect. The Fire Blast peters out, as Snorlax is safe from any more damage. It's here that Tobias tries to lead again with an extreme speed, but this is met with paralysis. Realizing the gift that he's been given, Ash takes advantage, calling for one last move of his Jiggly Giant. Rest! Snorlax falls back into a deep sleep at the surprise and concern of Tobias. Knowing this could be his only chance to end this, Tobias launches an all-out attack against Snorlax, with any move that Entei has a chance to use. Iron Head connects, then Extreme Speed, followed by Fire Blast. But unfortunately, the heat from the attack is what wakes up Snorlax, and it's angry. As for Entei, it's visibly winded. At one command, Ash tells Snorlax to launch a Body Slam that cannot be avoided, bringing Entei down for the count, much to the surprise of Tobias and the referee looking on. Tobias recalls his Fire Lion, thanking it for its hard-fought battle. Now Tobias must think. Snorlax is a problem. It's nearly at full strength, and the burn is gone. Well, if fire doesn't work, then Tobias chooses to go with the exact opposite. Articuno, go! The Ice Titan takes to the sky in all of its majesty. Here, Ash chooses to leave in Snorlax. As the battle starts, Tobias calls for an Ancient Power. Knowing that this could have some unfavorable outcomes, Ash chooses to call for a Protect. Tobias chooses to try another one more time, but Ash orders an Ice Punch that shatters through the rocks, hitting Articuno as Snorlax jumps for it. However, Snorlax is met with an Ice Beam. This hits the beast hard, but this is where Snorlax's ability comes into play. Thick Fat. Tobias is finding this out the hard way. This is the reason that Entei's Fire Blast didn't have that great of an effect, but Snorlax is starting to slow due to its fatigue. Ash then calls for rest once more, which Snorlax is all too happy to do. Tobias once again tries to use this to his advantage by using an Ancient Power. Ash calls to Snorlax, but it doesn't wake up and ends up taking the attack. This is where the one thing that Ash was hoping wouldn't happen, happens. The stat boost to Articuno. Tobias calls for another once again, but Ash won't let a second one go through, returning Snorlax for the time being. Now Ash is at a crossroads. Snorlax is his best bet to beat Articuno, but it's a long, drawn-out process. He wanted to hold off on this longer, but he's got no choice. Charizard, I choose you! Ash's oldest powerhouse takes to the field, with the ground shaking thud. Tobias looks on, weighing his options. Even though there's a type disadvantage, the stat boosts that Articuno has received are too good to pass up, so he chooses to keep it in for now. The battle starts with both Pokemon taking to the air. Articuno is much faster than Charizard, so Tobias tries to use that. Ancient Power, he calls. The boulders begin to speed towards Charizard, but Ash just smiles. Steel Wing, he yells. Its wings begin to glow, hardening as they shatter the boulder, striking Articuno with razor-like precision. This sends the Ice Bird into a barrel roll to avoid any more attacks from Charizard. Tobias then calls for an aerial ace. Suddenly, Charizard is on the receiving end of an attack that forces it to land. That move proves that Articuno is dangerous. They need to end this, Ash thinks. But before Ash can make his next move, Tobias recalls Articuno, surprising our hero. In the stands, Scott, Barry, Brock, Dawn, and Conway watch in silence as this battle has everyone's full attention. Above in the VIP section, Cynthia watches on, licking away at her ice cream, knowing full well that one of these two could end up battling her in the very near future. Back on the battlefield, Ash and Charizard wait for their next opponent to take to the field. They came to battle, so Ash tells Tobias not to disappoint them. Smiling, Tobias tells Ash he won't. The next one will electrify their battle as storm clouds begin to circle from above the stadium. Raikou, go! The Thunder Tiger takes to the field, surging with an electrical aura. Ash realizes that he may need to watch what he says, because things just got intense. The battle starts at the command of the ref, Ash calling for a flamethrower. But before he can respond, Raikou lights up the fire lizard with a discharge at the command of its trainer. Charizard cries in pain, forcing Ash to recall it before it can take any serious damage. Knowing he needs a win, Ash chooses his next path. Sceptile, I choose you! Taking to the field, Sceptile is still feeling the battle from Darkrai, but the effects of Overgrowth still haven't worn off. Ash makes his first move, and chooses to use a Leaf Blade. Rushing down the field, Sceptile finds itself in the personal space of Raikou, striking it with its blades. In response, Tobias calls for a Reflect to soften the strength of its physical moves. Ash tells Sceptile to fall back, assessing his options, but Tobias won't give them any time to think as he commands for an Aura Sphere. A ball of energy stripes Sceptile without warning, dropping it to one knee. It's at this point that Sceptile's aura starts to intensify. Overgrow is at its strongest, and that means that Sceptile is at its limits. This next exchange will end this. Not wanting to let up, Tobias orders one final Aura Sphere. As it closes in, Ash knows that there's only one option. Sceptile, use Energy Ball! Sceptile charges its final attack, forcing all of the energy from its Overgrow into it. The two spheres collide in the middle of the field for a brief second, before the Energy Ball rips the Aura Sphere apart and strikes Raikou, dropping it in the process. But this was only temporary, as it pushes off the ground, only for Sceptile to collapse from exhaustion, bringing this battle to a close. With a sigh, Ash recalls Sceptile. Thanks, he says. Now, Ash may actually have a chance. This isn't a race, it's a marathon, so if Ash doesn't pace himself, he will lose. Tobias compliments Ash on being able to take the battle this far. It's been a long time since he's actually had to battle an opponent. I knew this was going to be a challenge, Ash says. Your Darkrai has been impressive the whole tournament, so I knew that if I made it past that, then the set of challenges would only get harder. So I brought my oldest Pokemon, my strongest Pokemon. This was the only way I would have a chance. Well, I think your choices have been top-notch, but I'm afraid we are at the halfway point, and you're looking a little weary. Don't worry about me, Ash says. My Pokemon will rise to the challenge. The back and forth has Ash's friends on edge in the stands. Even Scott is wondering what his two champions are saying, but things are quickly interrupted when the ref calls for the start of the second half of this match. Tobias chooses to leave in Raikou. However, Ash has a choice. Both Charizard and Snorlax have battled, with one asleep and the other having taken a massive discharge from before. Ash knows that there's no other option. Holding the ball of his final Pokemon in his hands, Donphan, I choose you! The Tire Elephant takes to the field, stamping its hoofs, ready for battle. Tobias actually thought this might be a possibility, but isn't fazed as the battle starts. Ash calls for a rollout, but Tobias has a counter calling for Reflect. This halves the damage that Raikou takes. It's at this point, Tobias tells his legend to bolt around the field, forcing Donphan to chase it down. His hope is that it won't be able to keep up with the sharp turns, eventually losing momentum. But Ash is onto this, ordering his Pokemon to zigzag across the field, forcing Raikou into awkward positions, eventually finding itself on the receiving end of a rollout. Though the reflect is still up, that one was felt. Raikou took it on its back right leg, giving it a limp that could come into effect. This causes Tobias to recall it, sending back in Articuno. This causes the rollout to break, as Ash knows he can't let Articuno get any damage in on Donphan, so he recalls it as well, sending back in Snorlax, who is still snoozing away peacefully. Knowing this is his chance, Tobias calls for an ancient power that hits and allows another stat increase. Ash can't do anything but call to Snorlax, but it still just snores away with no care in the world. Tobias then calls for an Ice Beam. This move strikes, but the damage is minimal. All Ash can do is watch as another ancient power lands. Luckily, there is no stat boost, but the damage on Snorlax is starting to add up. But due to the previous battle, Articuno is starting to show some fatigue. This is where Ash takes his chance. As an Aerial Ace is called by Tobias, he recalls Snorlax, sending back in Charizard. As it emerges, the Fire Lizard avoids the attack, taking to the sky. Tobias calls for a final ancient power in hopes of ending this battle. Ash knows it's a risk, but he orders Charizard to fly in close in an attempt to dodge the levitating boulders. Unfortunately, one does hit Charizard in its head, but it shakes off the pain, finding its target, the Ice Bird. With nothing held back, Charizard launches a flamethrower, driving Articuno into the ground, ending this battle, but not in the way Tobias thought it would be. Knowing that Charizard took more damage than he wanted, Ash recalls it again. Now things are looking a little bit more even, but this battle is still in Tobias' favor, as he sends in Raikou once more. Ash is curious about this. Tobias seems to be avoiding his last Pokemon. Ash knows that a lot of his Pokemon are worn out, and one is asleep. Unfortunately, they have no choice but to keep pushing as he sends in Donphan once more. Ash knows that the reflect is still up as it hasn't faded yet, so he needs to be ready. As this battle starts, Tobias calls for an Aura Sphere. Ash tells Donphan to use Defense Curl. He knows this may not affect the damage much, as this is a special attack, but it does have another side effect. That is shown when Ash calls for Rollout. Tobias calls for a Crunch, but Raikou is overpowered by the Rollout, as the increased defense gave it the extra power not only to rival Raikou with Rollout, but to shatter the Reflect, allowing Ash to get in a good amount of damage. Raikou is having trouble moving at this point, with the injury from the earlier battle coming into play. Wanting to battle from a distance, Tobias calls for an Aura Sphere, but Ash can play this game as well. Donphan, Earthquake! Both Pokemon take the attacks unguarded, dropping them in the process. As the count starts from the ref, Donphan manages to get back to its feet, but it's wobbly at best. Raikou, however, is down, declared unfit to battle. Tobias recalls it, thanking it for its efforts, but this isn't a problem, as he sends back in Shaymin, who is still in Sky form. Ash knows it's a bad idea to leave in Donphan. Every advantage is in Tobias' corner, but if he can't win, then he can at least buy time. As the battle starts, Ash orders another Defense Curl, but this does little to help it evade the energy ball that it is hit by, knocking it out in one shot. Well, I guess that was a waste, Ash thinks. But thanks, Donphan. Because of you, we're still in the fight. You know, Tobias, all I've heard is how strong you are, and I have to say, to this point, you've lived up to the rumors. Well, Ash, I've been training Pokemon for a long time. The bonds I've built are ones that not many can say they have. Very rarely have I met someone who shares the same bond with their Pokemon, but I can say you do. This has been most enjoyable, but that doesn't mean we will lose this battle. We'll see about that, Ash thinks. He knows it's a long shot, but it's the best one he has right now. Snorlax, I choose you. Snorlax thuds onto the field, still asleep. Well, here's hoping, Ash mutters to himself. The battle begins with Ash calling to Snorlax, but nothing again. But Tobias sees this as an opportunity, calling for something that could make this worse for Ash. Leech Seed. Shaymin fires a seed at the sleeping behemoth that immediately begins to sap its strength. Shaymin feels the healing effects right away. It's here that Tobias calls for an energy ball in hopes of ending this battle. Swooping down to get in close, Shaymin drops the attack, but Snorlax suddenly bursts up as the Leech Seed starts to make it feel hungry. Shaymin is directly in its line of sight, firing the ball of Grass Aura into the face of Snorlax. This does cause some damage, but it's not enough, as while Shaymin is trying to pull up, Snorlax hits it with an Ice Punch, ending this match. Tobias can't believe it. Snorlax looked like it wouldn't wake up, but it did. Smiling, Tobias recalls Shaymin, readying his last Pokemon. Ash, you have made it this far, but your journey ends now. Latios, go! A blue, jet-like Pokemon bolts from the ball, heading into the sky. Tobias' last Pokemon has made itself known. Snorlax is looking around. It wants food. Ash can see this, telling Snorlax that it can have all the food it wants after the battle. This isn't what it wanted to hear, as its strength is now weakening. Ash tells it to win the battle. Then, they can go eat everything it wants. Snorlax smiles back at its trainer, ready for this final stretch. The ref calls for the start, but Snorlax is struggling before the first commands are given. It sits from fatigue. Tobias sees this, telling Latios to use Dragon Pulse. Ash, not understanding what's going on, tells Snorlax to use Body Slam, but its hunger has taken over. It takes the attack from Latios, barely hanging on. Ash knows he has one choice. Snorlax, use Rest. Snorlax lays back once more, trying to fall asleep. It slowly fades back into slumberland, much to Tobias's disdain. But it doesn't last for long as Snorlax wakes back up, seemingly unable to stay asleep. The hunger has it. It's then Ash remembers. Snorlax won't go back to sleep if it needs to eat, which makes the move rest useless. Then there's the Leech Seed. Snorlax is losing health fast. With no other options left, Ash goes on the attack, calling for a body slam. Unfortunately, Latios is much faster, being able to dodge the attack. Then Tobias calls for a Giga Impact. The Jet Pokemon charges in, aiming to end this. With one last attempt, Ash calls for an Ice Punch. Snorlax is able to hit Latios, but it is only at half power, as Latios is only grazed by it, landing its own attack. This drops Snorlax, ending the battle. No, Ash thinks. Snorlax, are you okay? But it won't stay down. The hunger still has it. Ash knows the best place for it is in its Pokeball, recalling Snorlax, saying that they will eat as soon as the battle is over. This is intense. Both trainers down to their final Pokemon. Ash looks down Latios and Tobias. He knows that there has been some damage done to Latios by Snorlax, but how much remains to be seen. Knowing that this is the last battle, Ash takes a deep breath. The last time he was in this situation with the same Pokemon, they battled an opponent that they knew nothing about, and they lost. But not this time, Ash thinks, clenching his final choice. Charizard, I choose you! Ash's last hope takes to the field, staring down its next challenger. Charizard, Ash yells. This is it. Everything in this battle rides on you. I know you can do it. Charizard spits fire, signaling it's ready for this last stand. With the start of the final bout underway, Ash makes the first move with the flamethrower. As the flames approach, Latios bolts vertically into the sky. Knowing they won't win on the ground, Ash tells Charizard to give chase. Flapping its mighty wings, Charizard takes to the air. Unfortunately, a massive disadvantage becomes apparent as Latios easily outpaces Charizard, forcing it to use long-range attacks to close the gaps. Latios is able to stay ahead, but the flamethrowers are slowly catching up. Ash knows he needs to find a way to get Latios to come to him. It's here Tobias gives an order for his own Dragon Pulse. Latios fires one that Charizard repels, leaving the two at a stalemate once more. But that altercation gave Ash valuable information that he needs to test. Charizard, keep up the flamethrowers, he commands. This continues for a few moments till Tobias calls for another Dragon Pulse. Ash watches closely as he orders a Dragon Pulse of his own. The two moves collide in an explosion of brilliance. Smiling, Ash sees his opportunity, telling Charizard to use Steel Wing. This forces Tobias to go on the defensive, ordering a Luster Purge. Charizard uses its wings to shield itself, exploiting the weakness that Ash found, allowing Charizard to get in close. At the command of its trainer, Charizard launches the most intense flamethrower it has ever mustered. Latios is enveloped completely in flames, as Tobias watches on, wondering how Charizard was able to get in that close. Charizard then takes to the ground, looking for some rest, as that flamethrower drained much of its energy. With everyone looking up at the fireball in the sky, it suddenly disperses, with Latios clearly having taken great damage from the attack. Latios flies down next to Tobias. Well, Ash, I have to say, you've surprised me getting that close. Yeah, it's subtle, but Latios moves so fast that it has to stop for short periods of time in order to aim for its attacks. That was our opening. Well, Ash, thanks for letting me know. Now, we can correct this flaw in our battle style. Latios then flinched slightly. Both Ash and Charizard notice. A burn, Ash thinks? That could be our next opening. Unfortunately, before they can complete that thought, Tobias calls for his next move. Light Screen. Really, Ash thinks? Now we have this? That's going to make things far more complicated. Charizard is already exhausted from the damage it's taken. That means there's only one play we have left to make that can potentially end this. But even that's a risk. Ash then orders Charizard to use a Dragon Pulse. This forces Latios back into the air. Then Ash has an idea. He needs to push Latios higher. Charizard, after it, he orders, use another Dragon Pulse. Taking flight, Charizard begins to gain altitude. It's on to what Ash wants to do. Tobias orders a dodge, telling Latios to use its own Dragon Pulse. Ash counters with a Steel Wing to reduce the damage, but it's at this point Tobias sees an opening, calling for what he thinks will be a final move. He orders a Giga Impact. Latios bolts through the sky, breaking the sound barriers in short distances across to connect with Charizard. The force of this is too great, and Charizard is sent spiraling to the ground with a deafening thud. Ash looks on in disbelief. Charizard, he mutters to himself. It's reached its limits, our hero thinks. Charizard struggles, pushing itself up with its arms. Everything hurts after that fall, and everyone can see it. But we are far beyond the point of giving up. Charizard refuses to stay down. As it shakes, it stumbles, pulling itself back to its feet. Charizard, don't! But Ash's words are cut off by a look from his oldest ace. This isn't over, the look says. We can do this. Ash smiles. Fine. If you won't give up, then neither will I. Tobias is surprised that Charizard is still able to stand, let alone battle. But this next altercation will be its last. Above, Latios hovers, awaiting orders, keeping its distance as it flinches once more from its burn. Ash tells Charizard to take flight. Once again taken to the sky, it's obvious that Ash's Pokemon is slower than before the fall. Ash tells Charizard to use Flamethrower. It fires one, but Latios has recovered from its recharge, so it's able to fly higher. This is it, Ash thinks, calling for a Dragon Pulse. Tobias orders Latios to dodge, wanting Charizard to get a little more elevation, so his next move will end it. It is at this point Ash thinks they are where they need to be, telling Charizard to hold itself there. This catches Tobias off guard, but this distance from the ground should be enough. He tells Latios to use one final Giga Impact. Latios rockets towards Charizard. Ash and Charizard make no move, just waiting and waiting. Their timing has to be perfect. Tobias thinks that this is it. Charizard, fire one last Flamethrower. Thinking the Light Screen will minimize the damage, Latios continues with its attack, using its Psychic typing to lock onto Charizard through the flames. But once it arrives at the location, it hits nothing. Instead, Charizard reaches from beneath, grabbing Latios around the neck, while Charizard's tail smacks it to change the angle of Latios' trajectory. Now both Pokemon are spiraling towards the ground at the speed that Latios was flying, with Ash giving the order. Charizard, Seismic Toss! Tobias tells Latios to counter with the Luster Purge, but Charizard is holding too tight, and it hits both Pokemon. The ground is within feet of the two powerhouses, so Ash tells Charizard to release Latios, but it refuses. This battle ends now as the two crash into the battlefield, with a rattling being felt by Ash's friends in the stand. A cloud of dust slowly disperses, revealing a sight of carnage, a crater in its wake. In the middle, the two lay. Both appear to be knocked out. The ref looks on. This battle is unlike anything he's ever seen before, but it's clear to him this is a draw. As he prepares to call the match, a rustling can be heard. Looking into the crater, Ash and Tobias' hearts pound in their chests. Who is it? They have to know. The fire lizard slowly rises to its feet, with the ref declaring the match over. Charizard wins! The crowd erupts. This battle has been the best one they've seen all tournament. Ash is stunned as Charizard collapses from the intense match it just had. We did it. Tobias simply smiles, recalling Latios. Turning to leave, Ash stops him. Tobias, thank you. He simply waves, walking off to leave the tournament. Crouching down next to Charizard, Ash thanks it for all of the work it put in. It smiles, unable to really do anything else. On the screen above, the next match is announced. Ash versus Paul. The finals of this tournament is a year in the making, with Paul staring down at Ash as he looks back up. Paul, we will win. Over in the stands, for the first time, Barry is at a loss for words, while Scott says nothing, just standing up. Hey Scott, looks like we know who the stronger Frontier champion is. Scott too smiles, leaving the stadium to tend to his duties as the Battle Frontier president. Later on that night, Ash, Brock, Dawn, Barry are at the Pokemon Center. They discuss today's events with Professor Oak. Well, Ash, after watching your battle, I have to say, I'm a little surprised you won. Me too, Professor. My Pokemon took a beating, mostly Charizard and Snorlax. As a result, I don't think I'll be able to use them for a while. Could you make sure they get plenty of rest? Will do, Oak says. Now, do you know the Pokemon you'll be using for tomorrow's match? I do, Professor, as we fade away to the next day. Ash and Paul stand across from each other in the championship round. Nothing is said, only the announcement of the start of the battle. The crowd goes wild as the two simultaneously declare, "Stand by for battle!" And that, my friends, is where we will leave this part. And that's all we have for What If Ash Won the Sinnoh League Part 12. How'd you guys feel about this one? Did you enjoy my take on what the battle should have looked like? Do you feel like this battle is one that Ash could have realistically won? And of course, are you excited for the finals of the Sinnoh League? Ash versus Paul, the match that's been in the making for over a year. Let me know in the comments down below. And if you like my content, why don't you hop into my Discord and join other creators who are like-minded in creating Pokemon content, or just in general, what-if content. Also, don't forget to follow me on Twitter for any updates, and of course, if you want to donate extra, please hop onto my Patreon. For only $5 a month, you get up to a week's early access to all of my what-if videos. And all of that is going to fund the 10K project that I have coming out, which we're on the fast track to hitting that milestone. But anyway, with all that being said, it's time to thank the sponsors of the video. The patrons. Silverheart Soul, Robert, Vegito Gaming 78, Andrew McCartney, Holosif, Julian Rodriguez, Ruben Watson, Lord Explosion Murder, Assassin 139, Flyer 943, Shadow Dragon, Tavern Landlord, K McKnight, Kevin Atran, Drax, True Vault, Adrian Carr, Dino King, Dalen Silva, Fox King, Dalian Petit, Warren E. Taylor, Plus Ultraman, Megar, Mike Logan, Team Valor, Kendall Green, Earth Dragon, John Larson, Alex Horsey, Forbidden Super, and Dylan Nicholson. Thank you all very much, and I will see you in the next video.